Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the nation right here, 2IT Nation. Jeff Waldorf, Ron Placone with you here today on a Wednesday. Hey man, welcome to the show.
What's up, Jeff? How's it going, buddy?
Pretty good. Just coming off a vacation here, so feeling pretty good.
Yeah, buddy. Did you have a good holiday?
Absolutely. What about you?
I had a good holiday, man. I went home to Pittsburgh, saw some family, and had a pretty cool time. Did a show Friday night.
Nice.
So it was cool to meet some people that watch this show and watch the Jimmy Dore show, and so it was really neat.
That's awesome. It's always good to have some time.
Good time.
Yeah, it's always good to have to do those shows and to have some time to yourself as well. So it's awesome. So got a great show for you guys today. We're gonna kick Agit Pie's ass, as I said to Ron before the show. That's the segment Ron's staying for, and then the rest of the show you'll have me. I'm gonna talk about Alan Dershowitz versus Bernie Sanders, the CFPB, of course. That decision, little bit of a setback for us, and then Joe Scarborough, and maybe if we can get to it, Project Veritas. So all this stuff on the show today, so stick around. It's going to be a great show. We'll start out with the FCC and Agit Pie and Twitter having a weird little spat.
Yeah,
so,
he's only trying to hijack the internet as we know it.
I know, right? And he's complaining about Twitter. But we'll get into that. We'll get into that. So Agit Pie's plan to destroy the internet has been unsurprisingly opposed by the internet. I know, right? Now, he's, of course, gotten a lot of heat since he released his proposal to eliminate Title II protections as well as net neutrality. He's reversing the Obama's administration's decision on these net neutrality rules because, well, I mean, he's working for the corporations. He's working for Verizon. He's a former Verizon lobbyist. So, of course, he wants to get rid of these rules. And, of course, he's being opposed by people who don't want to pay more for crappier internet. And, of course, people are letting him know how unhappy they are across all different mediums, which include Twitter, by the way, who Pie is now going after for targeting conservative voices. So before I let you jump in here, Ron, I want to give you this event, what he said during an event hosted by the R Street Institute, which is a conservative think tank. Pie had accused Twitter of hypocrisy for its criticism of the FCC's plan to repeal the Obama-era regulations. He said, when it comes to a free and open internet, Twitter is part of the problem. The company has a viewpoint and uses that viewpoint to discriminate. Okay. Twitter isn't an ISP. It's a private corporation. Here's the irony of you complaining about a private corporation discriminating against people while also going to allow private corporations to discriminate against people.
Right.
And content on the internet. This guy's a jackass of amazing magnitude.
Well, what this is a straight up straw man. You know, do I appreciate some of the stuff Twitter's been doing lately? No, I don't. I don't like the fact that they're banning parody accounts.
They got rid. Like I was going to mention that
political satire.
Like Peter Douche, he's like my favorite Twitter parody account, and they banned him.
Absolutely, man.
That sucks.
And we were lucky enough to interview Pat the Burner is the guy's name he goes by. We were lucky enough to interview him over on the Jimmy Dore show. And so I mean, this is not like there's some truth in the whole thing with what's going on with Twitter and this whole idea that do we really want social media moguls to decide what is and isn't free speech? Well, of course we don't. But in AG Pie's case, this is a straw man because what he is doing to the internet, and I think this is an important point we need to keep reiterating. What he's trying to do to the internet is completely, at least domestically, completely revolutionary in an awful way. I mean, this is something similar to what goes on in North Korea if he has his way. People that are against net neutrality kind of spread this very inaccurate sentiment that, well, we've only had net neutrality since 2015, and the internet was fine before then. That's a very misleading sentiment, and here's why. The idea of net neutrality has been around since 2005. Those rules were assumed by the FCC, and ISPs played along as well. What we didn't have was actual Title II protection, and that was what organizations like Free Press, third time's the charm, Free Press and Electronic Frontier Foundation and organizations like that, they've been pushing for that for years. Give us the Title II designation so that we know that net neutrality is protected concretely, right? We didn't have that, so eventually the cable companies took the FCC to court. They lost, the FCC lost, but the courts kind of said if you designate this a Title II and you would have a good reason to do so, then, you know, net neutrality is safe. And after the public twisted Tom Wheeler's arm and twisted Barack Obama's arm, we finally got the net neutrality that we needed. So it's very misleading to say, oh, net neutrality is not important. We've only had it since 2015. That's a very misleading sentiment, to say the very least. In some ways, it's not an outright lie, but it's incredibly incomplete and deceptive and in a very misleading and ill-informed way to look at things. So this would be just a completely unseen gutting of the internet in this country that we have never seen since the internet has been around. That's how severe this has the potential to be. And, you know, there was a really good New York Times piece written that it may come down to the courts to kind of save us here, because it looks like he has the votes. He has the Republican majority as far as the votes go. People need to keep net neutrality trending. They need to sign every petition that they can, even if it's from someone you don't agree with. Hey, I signed Kamala Harris's petition. I don't agree with her on very much, but on net neutrality, we do agree. You know, same with, you know, Al Franken used to be really good on net neutrality too. There's a lot of, and even places like Google and Netflix, are these people interested in net neutrality for their own self-interest? Yes, of course they are. It helps their business. But you know what? In this fight, take the unlikely ally and look at it as, hey, on this issue, we're all on the same side here. And that's good that we have some powerful allies, because we need them, because that's how important net neutrality is. It is that important.
Yeah, without it, I mean, our internet will look like, I mean, they use the Portugal example, right? Where they basically have packages, social media package, gaming package, you know, all these different extra packages for extra cost. That's what the internet's going to look like, where all this stuff is now put behind artificial paywalls that are going to benefit the ISPs. Look, I don't want to pay more for internet. I already pay enough. We already pay more than pretty much any other country in the world. I mean, yesterday I made the comparison between this and healthcare, because when you think about it, the pricing model is kind of the same. We end up getting less for paying more than the rest of the entire world that actually does have, you know, rules and also does have a lot of public utilities or public cable companies or public internet companies, I should say, public broadband. And by the way, speaking of public broadband, they have it in Kentucky, Chattanooga, or I'm sorry, Tennessee. I got that wrong.
They have it in Chattanooga, and I believe somewhere in St. Louis they're experimenting with it. And, you know,
and it's faster.
I don't mean to interrupt, but just as a side note on that, since you brought it up, in the long run, we're going to need a municipal solution. I mean, that's why so many other countries have so much better speeds than we do, and their internet is so much more affordable than ours, is because they don't have these corporate profit-driven duopolies controlling things. They have a municipal internet. At the end of the day, that's what we're going to need. But until that day comes, we need net neutrality. I mean, and it's one of those things. I mean, this could now, in IGPI's proposal, I mean, they could throttle content. They could straight up ban content, and all they need to do is be quote unquote transparent about it. So, I mean, this is a huge pressing issue, and you know, especially for independent content creators like you, Jeff, like me. I mean, our livelihoods are at stake. I mean, this is huge.
Yeah, but Comcast promised that they will not throttle or block or anything like that.
That's right. I love that. I love that so much where they're pushing for anti-net. That would be like the equivalent of someone being like, hey, I would never murder somebody. Would you ever murder somebody? No,
of course not.
I'd never murder anybody. Okay, well then we shouldn't have laws against murder, right? I mean, I wouldn't do it. You wouldn't do it. So we should just get rid of all these laws against murder, right? Like we just shouldn't have laws against it because I would never do it. Like that's the equivalent. Does that sound shady to you? If somebody came up to you and said that in seriousness, wouldn't you be really creeped out? Wouldn't you think they probably want to kill somebody? Just like, hey, we would never do anything to violate net neutrality, so we shouldn't have these laws for it. Why should we have these laws?
Yeah.
We'd never do anything to interfere with it. We pinky swear we're Comcast. Would we ever lie to you?
Would we? Actually, they did lie to all of us because right now they're setting up paid prioritization lines. Already they figured out a plan on how to do it. I talked about that yesterday in a segment. So, and they quietly kind of backed away a little bit from that promise. Well, I mean, we're not going to discriminate against legal content. Well, that can be taken as, well, hey, if we give everybody the chance to pay more for paid prioritization for faster internet lanes, that's not really discriminating, right? Because you just have to pay more. That's all. So that's what they're trying to do. Look, when Comcast came up with that tweet, I remember doing that, responding with, we don't trust you. We just don't trust you. Yeah. And there's a good reason why. And it's because these corporations are set up for one thing. They're set up to make money for their shareholders. They're set up to make money for the CEOs and their executives. And so they're going to do whatever they're going to do. That's why we actually need rules. That's why we need protections. That's why we need things, not to segue too far away from this, but organizations, agencies like the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, right? That's why we need these government rules and regulations and agencies that are looking out for us in order to protect us from predatory corporations.
And we can always count on Donald Trump to appoint people that want to get rid of those agencies to lead them.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I mean, so in IG, getting back to what IG Pie did, or IG Pie, this is just a straw man, and this is just an attempt because 76% of citizens favor net neutrality. So out of every 4 people, 3 of them favor net neutrality, and out of that 24%, I have a feeling that some of them don't know what net neutrality is, or have been grossly ill-informed on the topic, or our lobbyists for Comcast are part of that elite group that actually wants to gut these rules. So yeah, there is a huge outpouring of public support for net neutrality. It's still trending on Twitter, and people need to be as loud as possible because it might come down to the courts on this one, and that'll be that might be where the fight ends this time around, and then hopefully switch things over at the FCC as soon as possible.
Yeah, and it depends too on what court that it ends up in. If it ends up in the Supreme Court, it's over with. They already have Neil Gorsuch, who is the most corporatist person that's ever put on the court. Thomas, just all of these. Look, we have the most conservative, not conservative, corporatist court in history. They ruled with corporations most of the time. So if it ends up in the Supreme Court, we're done for. But one of these circuit courts or one of these appeal courts could end up giving us a positive. We don't know. We don't know where it's going to end up. But I guess it's premature to talk about it ending up in the Supreme Court. But I don't know. We'll see what decision that they make on December 14th. But I'm not expecting a victory.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, it is a little premature in some ways to go as far as Supreme Court, but it's certainly not premature to say we're probably, I mean, it looks like he has the 3-2 vote.
Yeah.
And I mean, hey, I've emailed all those people, and I encourage people to do the same, especially the 3 no votes. But it looks like he's going to have that 3-2 vote. So, yeah, I mean, it's but the public is responding, and hopefully even in the worst case scenario where we do lose net neutrality completely, hopefully the response is that we start building municipal internet now, because that would be a permanent solution for all this.
Yeah, and that's the direction that I want to see us go. So, and no matter what happens, we need to get on that.
Yeah, we inevitably will. Yeah. I mean, the question is how fast, how soon. And, I do have a feeling the one silver lining, if we do lose net neutrality, it would get us to that quicker. I think that's safe to assume. So, that's one kind of positive to take away from this very unfortunate situation that would be catastrophic for media democracy, for digital rights, and so forth. But that is one silver lining.
Okay. That's all I've got on that one. So you're gonna head out?
Yeah, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for stopping in. Thanks for all that information on net neutrality, and thanks for the discussion. As always, good to see you, man.
Yeah, guys, follow me on Twitter at @RonPlacone if you are so able. And I got a Patreon going on, patreon.com/RonPlacone. And I got a lot of tour dates that I'm going to be announcing soon, both with the Jimmy Dore Show, and Graham Elwood and I are going out on tour, the Political Vigilante. And I'm also still doing that house tour on my own. So I will be on the road a little bit more next year. And thank you, TYT Nation.
Well, thank you, Ron. We'll see you next week.
Cheers, buddy.
All right, everybody. I'm going to take a quick break here. We'll be back for the rest of the show. Got a lot of great stories, so stick around. We'll be right back. Everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here. TYT Nation. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf. Welcome back. So, more stories here. Before I get into those, I want to thank everybody who's watching. Please give us a like and a share if you haven't already. Also, huge thanks to the patrons. Patreon.com/TYT Nation if you want to support us and keep us on the air as usual. Because, of course, advertisers, YouTube, they kind of want to crush independent progressive media. So, as always, we could always use your help. So, and those who do help, thank you so very much for continuing to contribute. So, all right, let's go on to the next story. Let's talk about Alan Dershowitz. Oh, wait. Alan Dershowitz is not a fan of the leftward shift of the Democratic Party, thanks to Senator Bernie Sanders. In fact, he thinks sticking up for the people and not the billionaires and the multinational corporations actually hurts the party. That's an interesting, position to take. But look, by sticking up for the corporate Democrats and the centrism of Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton, that's essentially what you're doing. You're effectively sticking up for the corporations and not regular working people who are continuing to be crushed by neoliberal policies. So during an interview on Fox and Friends, Dershowitz said the Democrats must become more centrist and find some new faces to have any hope in the 2020 election. Now, he said that rallying behind Bernie Sanders, the most popular politician in America, by the way, is not the answer. No, we need to be centrist, we need fresh faces, and we need to stop following that dirty old socialist Bernie Sanders. Because we'll lose. If we run the most popular politician in America, we'll lose. But wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. As you're going to see, Dershowitz has no sense. Now, let me give you a quote here. Quote, "There's no way that Bernie Sanders could ever win 4 or 5 states." Really? That's fascinating. Look, he didn't get a chance to run in a general election. I understand that. But during the primary, he did really, really well. He got 46% of the vote. That's pretty good. And that's in a primary that was massively stacked in favor of one of the most well-known politicians in America. So, look, his poll numbers, his profile and his poll favorability numbers have only increased since that election. Now, one of the big problems that he had in the primary was a lack of name recognition and also a lack of money. But of course, that problem early on ended up no longer being a problem. Again, his name recognition has skyrocketed, his poll favorability skyrocketed, and he had a pretty good base of support from small dollar donations, building a political revolution about $27 at a time, which is amazing and something that we haven't seen in politics. At certain points, he outraised Hillary Clinton from small donations where she was getting donations from large corporations and super PACs. Bernie Sanders didn't have a super PAC, and he doesn't ever plan on getting a super PAC. That is unique in American politics today. He's the only guy who's saying, you know what, I'm not going to take big corporate money. You know why? Because that makes us indebted to those people, to those corporations and those super PACs that are giving me the money. I don't want to be indebted to anyone but the people. And so that's really important. That's really refreshing. And unlike Hillary Clinton, we believe Bernie Sanders when he says things because he has a long history of actually doing the things that he said and fighting for the things that he actually believes in. Now, of course, I am going to get the centrist response of, hey, look, Bernie Sanders couldn't win. He couldn't even win a primary against Hillary Clinton. Well, really, that primary was massively slanted in favor of one candidate who, again, at the time had more name recognition, money, and all the establishment support that she could get. But the same person polled consistently worse against Donald Trump in a general election. You're right, the primary election is not the same as the general election. So saying that if you lose a primary but can't win a general, well, that's disingenuous. That's making two different arguments. That's an apple and oranges comparison. But anyway, look, it looked like it was the opposite. Hillary Clinton could win a primary. Well, win. It's a bit dubious, but she could not win in a general election. So, back to Dershowitz, right? So, who does he prefer? Well, one name is Joe Biden. Now, he said Biden is a different character. He is beloved. A key win against, as you know, popular candidate. Who knows? How about no? Nothing against Biden personally, but we do not need to go back to the continuation of President Obama's policies. We need a more leftward shift. President Obama's policies, look, he talked like a progressive. He governed like a Republican light. Remember, 97% of the Bush tax cuts were enshrined into law under President Obama. That is something that George W. Bush couldn't even do these tax cuts. So, Republican light indeed. Now, I think we need to go in the opposite direction. We need a complete radical transformation on environmental policy, economic policy, education, and healthcare, which includes Medicare for all, tuition-free public colleges and universities, right? Making them tuition-free. Going with a green energy, renewable energy revolution to replace fossil fuels. Those are the directions we need to go, and we need bold action now. Right now, millions of students are drowning in student loan debt, for example. We have millions of people without health care. People who still have health insurance, but cannot afford their premiums and deductibles. They're stuck in a hard situation. And in the environment, it's getting bad. Climate change is, of course, getting even worse, especially under the Trump administration. That is something that requires radical change, and radical change now. So we cannot wait for the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. We're out of time. We're out of time. But of course, Dershowitz, he's like, no. We need to go back to the center, which means basically running to what is now the right wing. That's not what we need to do. And that's not what the American people actually want. They do not want more establishment bullshit where the ultra-rich get richer and everybody else's paychecks remain stagnant. We cannot afford the status quo anymore. Now, Dershowitz, again, he's going to go on about Bernie Sanders. Apparently, he's got a bone to pick with this guy. Quote, he should have been thrown out a long time ago. He's not even a Democrat, so why should we keep him in the Democratic Party, although he caucuses and votes with the Democrats all the time? He's a spoiler. I grew up with guys like Bernie, a dime a dozen. Fuck, I wish. He goes off to Vermont where he can really deal with the issues of America, where there are only white people. He's just somebody who represents the early 20th century, no future in politics. Now, isn't it amazing? Here you can have a candidate that is beloved by a majority of millennials of all races, and not just millennials, but a majority of the people. Again, he's the most popular politician in America, and he polls at 73%, by the way, with African Americans. Yet he only polls about 53% with whites on favorability. And yet you still have people in the establishment that are saying, oh, this guy's got no future in politics. He literally has the future. He's got millennials behind him. Younger voters overwhelmingly showed up. And look, they overwhelmingly showed up for Bernie Sanders, and that is literally the future. No future in politics. No, the time for Bernie Sanders is now. Okay, this guy's been fighting the same fight his entire life and has finally risen to prominence because of it. And you've got hacks like Dershowitz that are sitting there like, up, Bernie, no future, it's too far left. No, we need to run back to the center, which is basically the arms of the right wing. Back to more pro-corporatist positions that are incredibly unpopular. It's a losing strategy. Now, I mentioned that he's in favor of a couple of people, right? One was Joe Biden. Who's the other one? Joe Kennedy of Massachusetts. Look, I don't know a ton about Joe Kennedy. There was a speech where he actually came pretty strong. I don't know how progressive this guy is, so I haven't done a lot of research into him. But if Dershowitz likes him, well then immediately I've got a skeptical eye. Okay. Now he says, quote, maybe he is too young, but he is dynamic. He is the face of the future. I also think Mark Warner, who is the senator from Virginia, very centrist, for the Democrats to win, they would have to move to the center. No, dude. It's kind of what we did in the last election. I mean, look what happened. Okay, so back in 2008, President Obama actually ran as a progressive, right? So he ran as a progressive, and guess what? He got elected. He didn't govern as a progressive, but at least he ran as one. People were ready for change, right? People are still ready for change that has not changed. You look at some of these local elections, right, where people who are running as progressives, even open socialists from the Democratic Socialists of America, right, they run and they also win. That's interesting. Now, they didn't do so by going, oh, no, we need to run to the corporatist centrist position. No. People from the Democratic Socialists of America, they're like, yeah, we are running on a Medicare for all. We're running on these progressive issues. We're not running to the center. We've had enough of that. We're going to the left. And people were like, hey, you know what? That's interesting. I actually like the idea of having medical care. Let's give this guy a try, or this person a try. Let's see what happens. They did not run to the center. Again, failing strategy, right? And look, Hillary Clinton, she never had to run to the center. She was there. She was already there. She was already right-wing, okay? And nobody believed her when she actually did, later on in the general election, try to adopt some of Bernie's policies, mostly on college. There was that where she's like, well, I mean, yeah, we'll let people go to university, go to college, without paying too much, without getting too much debt, except for Trump's kids. Well, Trump's kids aren't going to go to a public university. There's a ridiculous sort of talking point and policy point, all to try to take Bernie's proposal and shift it more towards the center, what she thinks is the center. It didn't work because nobody believed her. So, and look, she didn't run as a populist. She never was a populist. She could never be a populist. Nobody would, again, believe her because she was, for her entire career, she was in bed with Wall Street, multinational corporations, and has always been very, very hawkish on foreign policy. So she was just too right-wing for a lot of people, and for everybody else, too untrustworthy. And I think she did earn some of that reputation, and some of it was unfortunately bestowed on her by the right wing as well, to be completely 100% fair to her. But enough on Clinton. Look, the Democratic Party wants to win. First of all, you got to stop listening to idiots like Alan Dershowitz or Stephen Klubeck, right? Which is one of the big, gigantic donors to the Democratic Party. I was like, hey, we need to stop being so left. No, fuck you, dude. The people want progressive policies. They want things like Medicare for all. They want the rich to pay their fair share in taxes. They don't want things like the Trump tax bill, which gives almost all the money to the rich. What is it? The Senate bill gives 60% of all the gains go to the top 1%. The American people, they don't want that. They want higher wages. They want an education that doesn't leave them with tons and tens of thousands of dollars in debt. Progressive policies are about making sure that we extend the ladders of success downward so that people can climb up. These centrist corporatist policies are about kicking the ladders down and actually taking all this money and giving it to the already wealthy. That's not what we should be doing. Only by going left and strongly holding to our progressive values can we actually start to make America great for everyone. And we need to start doing that. And we can, I guess we can start by ignoring Alan Dershowitz. Okay. Move on. Now, a judge has given the Trump administration a big win on the fight of who will lead the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now, yesterday, Judge Timothy Kelly denied a request by Leandra English, who was named last week as acting director of the outgoing CFPB chief Richard Cordray, for a temporary restraining order to block Mick Mulvaney from taking that post. Now, Kelly said that there was not a substantial likelihood that the case would succeed on its merits. So basically, here comes Mick Mulvaney, now able to destroy the CFPB. So this continues a long tradition of the Trump administration of appointing people to positions for the sole purpose of destroying said position. They're doing it with the FCC. Now they're doing it with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. So they're continuing that fine tradition. Now the White House, of course, is very, very happy about this. White House Deputy Press Secretary Raj Shah said in a statement, quote, "The administration applauds the court's decision. It's time for the Democrats to stop enabling this brazen political stunt by a rogue employee and allowing Acting Director Mulvaney to continue the Bureau's smooth transition into an agency that truly serves to help consumers." President Trump also tweeted, "Just won the lawsuit on leadership of Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, CFPB, a big win for the consumer." Well, how? How is that a win for the consumer? See, Mulvaney, when he was in Congress, he voted to eliminate the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And he received gigantic campaign contributions from banks, credit card companies, and even payday lenders, all of which would be regulated by the CFPB. He has worked on behalf of those banks, which means that he's not going to be interested in working on behalf of you. Now, thankfully, the fight isn't quite over, even though I don't see much in the way of good coming from these decisions. According to Politico, while this ruling cannot be challenged, Deepak Gupta, English's lawyer, told reporters that he would have to consult with his client about the next steps. These could either involve seeking a preliminary injunction or requesting a ruling on a permanent injunction, either of which could be appealed to a higher court. He said the court is not the final stop. This judge does not have the final word on what happens in this controversy, and I think he understands that. But look, again, I don't have much faith in the higher courts, especially if this goes to the Supreme Court. I don't know how likely that will be, but look, the SCOTUS, well, for one, they could flat out refuse to hear it. Okay. Or worse, they could side with the Trump administration, and more importantly, the corporations who will be able to, without the CFPB, steal with impunity. Now, it's kind of like putting the robbers in charge of the police station. And look, the Supreme Court would likely, I think, side with the Trump administration because, again, you have the most corporate-backed court in history. They've sided with corporations more than any other Supreme Court that we've ever had. These people are bought and paid for by the companies. Now, as I explained to you a couple of days ago, English's claim to the title of the CFPB acting director stems in part from language in Dodd-Frank. Now, the legislation that established the Bureau in the first place. It says that the deputy director shall become the acting director in the absence or unavailability of the director. Well, Richard Cordray, he stepped down. He immediately named her the deputy director. She was the chief of staff. And he's like, okay, now you're taking over. Well, that seems fairly clear, right? Now, the Justice Department does not agree and said late Monday night that English's claim is not strong enough to supersede the purview of the Vacancies Reform Act, which empowers the president to fill a vacancy at an executive agency. Now, the judge ruled on its face the VRA does appear to apply in this situation. Now, Politico explains that specific laws generally supersede more general laws. So the more specific you are, I guess the better chance you have at superseding a law that is less specific. Now, Kelly said that while Dodd-Frank is more specifically related to the CFPB, and it would be, since this is the law that created the CFPB, he said the vacancies law is more specific in that it explicitly refers to a vacancy. Dodd-Frank does not use that word. What it says is that the deputy director shall become the acting director in the absence or unavailability of the director. But since it does not mention the word vacancy, well, look at that. Trump gets to make his pick. I think it's really all up to interpretation at this point. So, but here's the thing. This judge is a Trump appointee. So, big surprise. You have a pro-corporate ruling from a pro-corporate judge who just didn't like Dodd-Frank. So, big surprise, right? It's funny how this whole thing turned out. But look, in the end, Trump gets his win. The banks get their win, and the consumers will suffer. So, the next time a bank decides to rob you, like Wells Fargo has been caught doing by the CFPB and punished by the CFPB, there will not be anyone there to protect you if Mick Mulvaney has his way. Do you still feel like you're winning? Okay. I'm going to take another real quick break here. We'll be back. We got a couple more stories, so stay right here. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show, Around the Nation, right here, TYT Nation, Jeff Waldorf with you. If you haven't already, please give us a like and a share. Definitely appreciate that. Let's move on to the stories. Joe Scarborough is next. Oh boy. It's a weird story. All from a tweet. All right. President Trump has taken this feud with MSNBC's Joe Scarborough to a weird new level by calling for an investigation into the death of one of Scarborough's interns. This happened a long time ago. I didn't even know that this happened. So again, this is weird how a tweet kind of pointed out something that I didn't know and kind of sparked my interest. Now, in a tweet calling for Scarborough and MSNBC President Phil Griffin to be terminated in the wake of Matt Lauer's firing, which has to do, of course, with sexual assault, sexual harassment, the president mentioned an unsolved mystery that took place in Florida years ago. He tweeted, "So now that Matt Lauer is gone, when will the fake news practitioners at NBC be terminating the contract of Phil Griffin? And will they terminate low ratings Joe Scarborough based on the unsolved mystery that took place in Florida years ago? Investigate." First off, what the fuck? Second of all, he's president. Why is he calling for an investigation on Twitter? Second of all, he's unhinged. I swear, the man is unhinged. Now, if you're wondering what he's talking about, what do you mean? What dead intern? Is this like another Seth Rich? Well, according to The Hill, Trump was referencing Lori Klausutis, a 28-year-old office staffer who worked for Joe Scarborough when he was a representative from Florida. Klausutis was found dead in the congressman's district office in July 2001. Oh my God, it must have been a murder. Really? I don't know. A local medical examiner ruled the death an accident, saying Klausutis had collapsed and hit her head on the side of the desk, which is definitely plausible. She had an undiagnosed heart condition, which would have been diagnosed probably if she had health insurance. Again, I'm not blaming her, whatever. Now, this undiagnosed heart condition, according to the medical examiner, is what she had, and that the head trauma, basically falling and hitting her head, caused a fatal blood clot. I don't know exactly how that works, but this is according to, like I said, the medical examiner. And I tend to trust their word unless there's something weird that sticks out. Now, the medical examiner, like I said, ruled her death an accident, and she had worked for Scarborough since May of 1999. So, now, again, so Trump brings this up, and he's like, we need to investigate. But again, they already did investigate, and they found that she died from an unfortunate accident, and sometimes that happens, and it's always tragic when something like that happens. But no, here comes Trump with the conspiracy theories, right? Which is funny because I think there have been other people that have also talked about this. Now, Gawker once pointed out, there is zero evidence to suggest that Joe Scarborough had anything to do with the death of Lori Klausutis, but the story of her death has nevertheless haunted Scarborough over the years. Because anywhere from some conservatives who don't like Joe Scarborough to even some liberals like Joe Scarborough would bring it up from time to time. There was Marcos Melitzis from Daily Kos who brought that up. Now, they got into a little Twitter fight. He actually got banned from MSNBC. Not Joe Scarborough, but Marcos got banned from MSNBC for bringing it up. That's interesting. And he's like, oh, no, I didn't actually say that he murdered her or anything like that. I just brought it up. You brought it up to the point of where you got, banned from MSNBC. Again, that's super interesting. I'm not exactly in favor of MSNBC. You guys know me, or Phil Griffin or anything like that. And I do think that they love their beloved Joe Scarborough. They give him 3 hours in the morning to spew right-wing propaganda. I get that, right? Nonetheless, I think I'm going to take a side on this one and be like, what the fuck are you talking about? There's no truth to any of this. There's no truth. There's no conspiracy that he killed this poor woman. What would be the motive? Again, it doesn't make any sense. Now, there's a story in the Sarasota Herald Tribune on 2001 that noted that 28-year-old was found dead in Scarborough's office. Okay, that itself would seem to be suspicious. However, the story said the preliminary findings from the medical examiner's office showed no foul play or any outward indication of suicide. So again, I'm not in favor of Scarborough, but I do happen to be in favor of facts. And if the medical examiner called it an accident and didn't find any evidence of foul play, well, then that seems to be good enough for me. But again, Trump loves his conspiracy theories, and he hates Joe Scarborough. Remember, this wasn't an issue with the president until he decided to despise Joe Scarborough. So, look, they were during the primary, they were buddy. They were hanging out with each other. They were doing softball interviews. He'd call into Morning Joe all the time. Oh, I love Morning Joe. Wonderful show. Mika's fantastic. All that stuff. And then he started being critical of Trump, and it completely changed. That's why this is, this is nothing more than Trump being a petty, vindictive child. And there's no truth to this. And here's another angle to this that I think is interesting to talk about. I think that he is already super scared of the investigation into him, that he's got to go and distract with calling investigations on everybody else. Oh, we got to investigate Hillary Clinton. We got to investigate Joe Scarborough. We got to investigate Bob across the street. I don't know. Bob's giving me shifty eyes. Investigate him. No, dude, he's trying to distract you. Again, he's got all these investigations into him. He's got Mueller that is targeting his inner circle. They're going after Flynn. Hell, they might even actually have Flynn. They've got Manafort already. Papadopoulos. They're looking into Jared Kushner. They're looking into Donald Jr. His entire inner circle seems to be falling apart. Seems to be under investigation. So here comes the crazy tweets from Donald Trump to try and distract everybody. And Scarborough wrote as much. He said, "Looked like I picked a good day to stop responding to Trump's bizarre tweets. Quote, he is not well." Again, I love to point out when Joe Scarborough is wrong, which is like 98% of the time. But on this one, when you're right, you're right. It's insane. Okay. I'm going to try to make this one a little shorter than it is, but there's so many details in this story. I'm going to do my best. All right. So a couple of days ago, the Washington Post came out with a fantastic story. Now, apparently, there was a woman who went to the news outlet with a story about Roy Moore. Now, in this story, she alleges that when she was 15 years old, she had sex with Roy Moore and was pregnant. Well, now that's a juicy story, right? So any agency is like, ooh, I'm interested in that story. If this is true, well, this is a bombshell. Also considering that in the story, she had gotten an abortion not soon after. Oh, man, look at pro-life Roy Moore getting an abortion. Oh, my God. First getting this underage girl, teenage girl pregnant, and then an abortion. Well, this story happened to be too good to be true. And so there were a few red flags. And so the Washington Post did their due journalistic diligence and found out that, yes, it was too good to be true. It was a fake. So let me give you some of the details on that. Now, in a series of interviews over 2 weeks, that woman shared a dramatic story about an alleged sexual relationship with Roy Moore in 1992 that led to an abortion when she was just 15. Again, everything is there. It's very, very salacious. It's Roy Moore. It's an underage girl. Perfect, right? Too perfect. During the interview, she repeatedly pressed the reporters, and this is how they found out that it was too perfect. Because, again, one of these red flags is that she pressed reporters to give their opinions on the effects that her claims could have on Moore's candidacy. Now, that is not something that a victim would generally be concerned about. Like, most victims are like, I just want to get my story out. I want people to know what happened to me and what kind of person this person is. But this one's like, so tell me if your opinion. Is Roy Moore going to lose the election? Like, if I come out with my story, is it guaranteed that he's going to lose? I don't know. I'm just a reporter. I'm just here to get the facts. And whatever happens, happens. And if this is true, this is an important story. And it goes to the character of Roy Moore. But really, what we're trying to do is we're just trying to get the facts, right? That's the whole point. So the fact that she was so worried about what would happen to his election, again, super shady, super weird, right? Now, here's the thing, right? So, look, if you want the opinion of a reporter, right? Again, that looks super weird, right? Because their job is to report the story and not to talk about the reporter's opinions. Now, that's actually the opposite of what conservatives think the media actually does. See, the conservatives are like, no, all we are is opinion because we don't have facts and we make things up in order to serve a political agenda. So we think that that's what liberals do all the time. When actually, no, a lot of liberal publications, they don't make things up. And they actually do their due diligence. They do report things. And when they get things wrong, they will come back and they'll actually admit, yeah, we misreported this. We apologize. Now, that's on straight reporting. So the Washington Post has done a lot of opinion pieces and op-eds that have actually driven me crazy because they have a bias, right? Now, I think it's an establishment bias. It's a bias of the status quo, a bias of the cocktail circuit, the Beltway, all that stuff, right? And that's why they go after people like Bernie Sanders, who actually try to upend that system. They can't fathom it. What are you talking about? Why do we need to change the system? The system is working perfectly for me and my friends. Yeah, but again, you're living in this bubble. You have this bubble mentality. That's not necessarily their fault, but they cannot see beyond the Beltway. And so that's where that bias comes from. But when it comes to straight reporting, and especially investigative journalism, the Washington Post and the New York Times actually do a lot of great work. So this is no exception. They actually did their due diligence, right? Now, Post reporters, when confronted with her inconsistency, they confronted her with her inconsistencies, right, in her story, and they had found an internet posting that raised doubts about her motivations. Now, they found all this stuff through their investigation because, again, they have to look into these claims and see if they're true. What they found was, again, things that pointed out that her story had some big red flags in it, big inconsistencies where it was possibly not true. Now, this internet posting, as I said, raised some doubts. It was a GoFundMe page. And then there was also the fact that reporters had saw her walking into the headquarters of Project Veritas. Now, that organization is headed by James O'Keefe. And basically what they do is that they set up ambushes, right? They will go and deceptively edit videotapes and release them to try to shut down agencies. Remember, they shut down Acorn. They had the famous video with the pimp outfit, which actually wasn't even filmed there, but it was deceptively edited in. They had the baby parts video. So they've done a lot of deceptive practices in order to get their so-called sting videos. And that's what they were trying to do to the Washington Post. Now, when they found out that this woman was hanging out with Project Veritas, again, when they confronted her with this information, she was no longer forthcoming with her story. They said the woman, identified as Jamie T. Phillips, no longer wanted to respond to calls to her cell phone, and her car had remained in the Project Veritas parking lot for at least more than an hour. Now, that's really important because they actually pointed out her name, right? They don't normally do that, especially if she was an alleged victim. But again, her story did not add up. It was so flimsy, and again, she was caught going into this office, that houses this group that targets mainstream journalists to try to shut them down and targets left-leaning groups to try to shut them down. Again, that is super, super shady. So now I'm going to skip a lot of the details here on that because you should definitely read the piece. I'll put that in the article in the description box of the video. Sorry. We'll put the article, but I want to read the where this actually had begun. Now, the day after Lee Corfman, the story of Lee Corfman and some of the rest about Roy Moore had come out in the Washington Post, one of the co-authors, Beth Reinhard, who co-wrote the article, had received an email the next morning from an alleged victim, this alleged victim. She said, Roy Moore in Alabama, I might know something, but I need to keep myself safe. How do we do this? And she went by a pseudonym, Lindsay James. Now, that co-author sent an email, said, hey, can we talk off the record? Can we do this by phone? You know, this is the normal stuff. She's like, no phone calls, just internet, and then just email. And then eventually she did open up to do at least one phone call and an in-person meeting. Now, that same day, when that email had come out, Gateway Pundit spread a false story from a Twitter account that said a family friend in Alabama just told my wife that a Washington Post reporter named Beth offered her $1,000 to accuse Roy Moore. That Twitter account had been later deleted and had actually been spreading a lot of misinformation. Now, on November 14th, a pastor in Alabama said he received a voicemail from a man falsely claiming to be a Washington Post reporter and seeking women willing to make damaging remarks about Roy Moore for money. Now, of course, they don't do that. It's not good practice to go and pay people for dirt on other people. So they don't pay people to come out for negative stories. Now, that was the Bernie Bernstein call, by the way. So while this was going on, this reporter was communicating with that woman who wanted to set up a meeting. Now, they met, she said her story, and during that whole meeting, she asked the reporter to guarantee that Moore would lose the election if she decided to go public with her story. She said that she could not predict what the impact would be, the reporter did, and said that she explained to Phillips that her claims would have to be fact-checked. She had asked for documents to corroborate her story. She didn't get those documents. She didn't get what she wanted. She didn't get that guarantee, which is what they were trying to find on to film on tape. So she went to another reporter. Now that other reporter, of course, found that GoFundMe page by someone with the same name. It said, I'm moving to New York. I've accepted a job to work in the conservative media movement to combat the lies and deceit of the liberal MSM. I'll be using my skills as a researcher and fact checker to help our movement. So that was the GoFundMe. Now, they did some more checking because they thought, okay, look, we found this GoFundMe. This one, her story, very, very flimsy, but we still got to do our due diligence, right? Maybe we got something wrong. So we're going to fact check this. We're going to see if her name is the same or different, because it's a fairly common name, right? Jamie T. Phillips, right? Well, in addition to the name, one of the two donations listed on the page was from a person whose name matched her daughter's, according to public records. And so that seemed to have cemented among all these other red flags that this is not a person who had any real information, who was actually trying to set up a sting. So the Washington Post set up their own sting, which was awesome. Now, they met with they agreed that the second reporter agreed to meet with Jamie Phillips, who brought along some videographers on the side. And during that meeting, she asked Phillips to identify herself with a photo and then asked her about the GoFundMe page. She said, we have a process of doing background, checking backgrounds, and this is in this kind of thing. So I wanted to ask you about one thing. I wanted to ask you if you could explain this. And she had actually taken out a picture of that GoFundMe page. And I also wanted to let you know, Jamie, that this is being recorded and video recorded. Okay, Phillips said. Yeah, I was looking to take a job last summer in New York, but it fell through. Yeah, I was going to be with the Daily Caller, but it ended up falling through, so I wasn't able to do it. When asked who at the Daily Caller had interviewed her, she said, quote, Kathy, before pausing, adding the last name, Johnson. Yeah, Kathy Johnson. That's who she is. I interviewed with her. That's who it was. No, it actually wasn't. Later on, they got a hold of the Daily Caller and asked her about Kathy Johnson, about Jamie T. Phillips. It turns out they hadn't heard of her. Paul Connor, executive editor at the Daily Caller, said Monday that no one with the name Kathy Johnson works for the publication and has no record of having interviewed Phillips. Connor later said in an email that he had asked other top editors at the Daily Caller and the affiliated Daily Caller News Foundation about Phillips. Quote, none of us has interviewed a woman by the name of Jamie Phillips. Oops. So, super obvious lie, okay? And they found that out after the meeting, which ended with Phillips just saying, hey, you know what? Turns out I don't want to sell my story. I'm just going to leave. Okay. Now, Post reporters, after that happened, went to look at the GoFundMe page and found that it was gone. The only message that was left, and by the way, the day that she walked out of that interview, she took down that fundraiser. And it said, campaign is complete and no longer active. Look, there it was. So, okay. Now, here's the thing, right? This was awesome. The fact that the Washington Post caught on with, again, they did their homework and actually set up this sting to go out and take this person down who was actually trying to take them down. Super awesome. But the thing is that I don't think that when it comes to the right wing, the people who actually believe Project Veritas, the people in the conservative movement, they're not actually going to, you know, believe in the Washington Post. This isn't going to change anything. See, here's the thing, right? This is actually going to end up working in favor of Project Veritas when it comes to their conservative readers. Now, look, let me give an example. The Planned Parenthood videos, the baby parts videos, right, that were widely debunked and people actually went to jail for, they're conservatives that still believe it. They're still talking about baby parts. Now, I realize the whole point was to discredit accusers of Roy Moore, and as well as the Washington Post, right? Oh, fake news, right? Here's Washington Post coming up with fake news, fake interviews. Now, look, they failed at this, right? But the people who follow Roy Moore, the people who never believed in the Washington Post, still don't care. As of now, Roy Moore is still 5 points ahead. Only 9% of Trump voters believe in the accusations against Moore. And no matter what, they will not believe anything posted in the Washington Post. So, yeah, they may have defended themselves, and they did great. They did their due diligence. They did their homework. They did what every news organization is supposed to do in this sort of situation. But none of this is going to sway Trump supporters. None of this is going to sway the people who have convinced themselves that that all other news than right-wing news is fake. They live in their own reality. Again, this is why O'Keefe and Veritas are still in business despite their massive record of failure. They have the true believers. And unfortunately, that is not going to change. Now, fortunately for the majority of us, the Post did an excellent job, again, exposing Veritas for what it actually is, so that people who are not true believers, people who don't know much about politics, don't know much about the right wing, you know, regular people, regular voters, can see Veritas and the right wing for exactly what it is. And I guess at the end of the day, that's the only victory that we have. Okay. That's it. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for giving us likes and stuff. Thank you to the patrons, as always, for making sure this show continues. You guys are awesome, as always. So thank you very much. We'll have another great show tomorrow, so make sure to tune in. 3 p.m. Eastern, right here, TYT Nation. Please subscribe to the channel for more videos and, you know, notifications of whenever we go live. So, all right. That's it. Love you guys. We'll see you tomorrow. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation.